It's historically one of my children's favorite songs, and then became one of my favorite songs. Because if you don't know a lot of scripture and haven't memorized a lot of scripture, if you've never been to seminary and had the privilege of learning under the tutelage of a Yvonne Zimmerman or a Tim Van Meter or Valerie Bridgman, if you don't know how to exegete, you don't know what hermeneutics or homiletics are, if you don't know any of that stuff, you know that there's nothing that your God cannot do. If you've been through what I've been through, my parents and foreparents, and what many of those who we recognize and we honor and we take time in this month of February, you know what they've been through and how far that they've come. You know that there's nothing that my God cannot do. So it's nostalgic almost to be back in this place and to see so many people and to be home. I was home Sunday at the church that I was honored to pastor for some 6 years, and now home here at a place so dear to me that I cherish so much, so dear to me that you're probably going to have 2 students starting next fall that I had something to do with helping to recruit in front of my current institution's table last week at Proctor Conference. So I had my Wesley shirt on and I was standing in front of the Wesley table and I was standing there next to Gabrielle as we were recruiting 2 people to MTSO. And my staff didn't let me forget where I was now. As always, I want people to come to Wesley, but if they don't come to Wesley, I want them to come to MTSO. And if they don't, and that will always be, this will always be my alma mater. The text for today has already been read for your hearing. And I've become somewhat of a lectionary preacher, Sister Dean. And when I saw the Psalm text, I knew I wanted to spend some time here because this text is always, I won't say bewildered me, but there's some things kind of tucked away in here that I figured were apropos for this last day of February, Black History Month, Psalm 121. And I'm going to really focus on really the first verse, but kind of the first 2 verses. So I'm going to read them again for your hearing. Really, those first 2 verses. I will lift up my eyes to the hills. From where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on us. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on us. Break us and melt us, mold us and break. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on us. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. As I stated, this text maybe not bewilder me, but has always intrigued me for several reasons. One reason is the difference in translation of verse 1 between the authorized of the King James Version and most modern translations like the New Revised Standard Version that was read for our hearing earlier. In the King James Version, which is how many of us, at least in my culture and experience, first heard or read this psalm, the psalmist, who is unknown and unnamed, speaks of their help in a declarative statement of assurance. But in many modern translations, such as the NRSV, the psalmist asks a question, albeit what I believe to be a rhetorical question about their help. So the King James, I will lift up mine eyes to the hills from whence cometh my help. But the modern translation phrases that as a question. From where will my help come? Just always, just kind of, when I first heard it, read and probably in the NIV actually before the NRSV heard it in that question form, it had me want to ask more questions of the question. Clearly by verse 2, in both translations, the psalmist is confident that their help is in the Lord. Their help comes from the Lord. that when they need help, they can look to the hills, and the creator of the heavens and the earth will not only keep them from all evil, but watch this, and more importantly, probably that the helper, the Lord, will keep them while they're in any situation where evil is present. So many of us get wrapped up in being kept from evil, but if you've lived any amount of time, you know it's real hard to be kept from evil all the time. Evil seems to be all around us in many situations and many systems and many structures. And the good news for us and those who believe in Almighty God is that God will keep us in any situation. Maybe it's just me. I'm glad that God kept me while I was in the messes that I was in, so that I could come out of the messes, because God is a helper. But that's just one of the reasons that intrigues me about Psalm 121. The other thing that intrigues me about Psalm 121 is the use of the word help. In this context, the help that the psalmist looks for and receives from the Lord is strength and protection. It was in my early on in my studies at MTSO when I learned that the word help used here in Psalm 121 verses 1 and 2 is used several times in the Hebrew Bible to describe God or describe an attribute of God. But what floored me was learning that the same word for help in the original language used in verse 1 and verse 2 of Psalm 121 to describe God or an attribute of God as being a God of a protector and strength and refuge and a strong tower, as the praise team sang about. That same word is also used to describe a human being. It's only used one time to describe a human being or an attribute of a human being. And that one human being is describes Eve in one of the creation narratives in Genesis. God creates a mate for Adam. Eve is described using the same word in the original language. It's the only other time the word is used in reference to a human being. Every other time it's used in the Hebrew Bible, it's used to describe an attribute of God. But somehow, the same word used to describe the strength and power of God has been used in many circles and settings to describe Eve, and frankly, every other woman after her, as a helper who doesn't provide strength or power, but somehow provides assistance to someone, generally a man, generally her husband. The same word used to describe the power of God is used in the context of a woman and used to subjugate her and put her or keep her in her place. Somehow we come up with this strange word called helpmeet. And she is meant to serve in a complementary role to her protector and her provider and her leader. I could go on about the detrimental effects these beliefs still wane on many parts of society, including the church. But what I want to leave us with today, I know I'm Baptist, but I'm almost done. What I want to leave us with today is the fact that all of us who have ever breathed have needed and benefited from help, and actually benefited from the help. Yeah. In my community in particular, we know about the help. Maybe you've been introduced to the help by a film in 2011 starring Viola Davis and Emma Stone and Octavia Spencer. The film and novel recount the story of a young white woman and inspiring journalist, Eugenia Skeeter Phelan. The story focuses on her relationship with two Black maids, Abilene Clark and Minnie Jackson, during the Civil Rights Movement of 1963 in Jackson, Mississippi. In an attempt to become a legitimate journalist, the writer Skeeter decides to write a book from the viewpoint of the help, or the maids, exposing the racism they face as they work for white families on a daily basis. Black domestic workers in the 1960s America were referred to as the help, and hence the title of the journalistic expose and novel and the film, and where many of us learned about that terrible, awful power. But I knew about the help growing up. My great uncle, who served as a grandfather for me, Lex Chisholm, was the help for the Ross family, Richard M. Ross and Elizabeth Ross. You might know her of that name if you spend any time at a hospital at Ohio State or seen Ross Labs or Abbott Laboratories. The Ross family lived in Bexley, and my grandfather, Uncle Lex, was a houseman or butler or driver. He was part of the help. My Aunt Roxy, my queen Roxy, who just passed away in December, 92 years old, was a widow early on in life. My uncle George died in 1982. My aunt was a clerk at Ohio State, but to help to supplement her income after Uncle George died, and to also, quite frankly, to support her spending habit, she would work part-time for some of the rich families in the Bexley area and help to clean their homes. She was the help, whether they be Black domestic workers in the 1960s or the modern day help who clean our hotel rooms and dry clean our clothes and pick our produce. They are the hidden figures that don't just merely keep the cogs of our economy running, but they are the backbone and strength and soul of our society. When we celebrate even Black history, we are quick to highlight the Martin Luther King Jr.'s and quick to highlight those who've gone on and done great things, but often we forget about the help. And if it wasn't for the help, many of us would not be here. Because of the help, many of us were able to attain levels of education and professionalism that we never weren't able, that our parents and grandparents were never able to do. They suffered and dealt with many just awful things, and the names that they were called, and not being able to look certain people in the eye who were half their age, and not being able to and called out of their name because they were just the help. But there's something about the help that I want us to focus on today. What I want us to focus on is not for us to look as to the help, in particular for those of you who are either beginning your journey here at MTSO or almost done with your journey here at MTSO. I'm looking forward to be back here in May for the 60th commencement, because so many of you will finally be finishing your journeys. And even though I'm no longer here, it's still my favorite day of the year. And some of you very close to me sitting in this room will be walking across that stage, and I'm going to be here. It's not going to be virtual this year, is it? We're going to be back in person. We're going to be back in person. Who can help me? We're going to be back in person. All right. All right. We were back in person last year, weren't we? Yeah, I had a high schooler graduating, so I missed it. So that's my fault. But what I want you to get, particularly students, is that there is help for you that go beyond your faculty members. That's clearly help for you. And they come from in a position of authority. They grade your papers and they have those. There's administration here, but there's people on this campus that often we don't think about who are help, who are just as vital to your success here. I could go through names of people who you would never know, who work in offices and back offices and count money and make sure that loans are applied to accounts and make sure that the mulch beds are clean, and make sure so many things that happen to help you here. And I never want us to forget who those people are. When I dropped my my baby boy off at Morehouse in August, I made sure that he understood that just as important as the professors in the class would be that man or woman who's going to cook that meal, that man or woman who's going to make sure that your dorms are covered, and person to make sure that the hot water is on, like it wasn't on this last week that he reminded me of. Because there's so much that can be learned from the people that often we just think of as the help. And there's power and strength that come from those people. There's so many things that are vital for us to learn from people who don't have their names at the top of a syllabus, or may not have their names on a calendar. And of course, they're so important. There's some of the people that have impacted my life the most to this day were those professors, but they were also people whose names weren't on the marquee, whose names weren't on the front of the programs at graduation, There are people that kind of made sure that this institution ran, and I never want you to forget those people. You may never meet them. You may even never know their names, but they're working hard. And it has become harder to do, not just at MTSO, but across the scope and span of theological education. If somebody working in theological education, whether they're the president, the dean, or they are working in a dining hall, it's out of a love that's greater than nobody's here because making a check and making a lot of money. That goes for your professors and all. It's out of a call and a mission, whatever they're doing. I know that's right. Really, praise the Lord. And so maybe this is today, as I read this and came across this Psalm 121 text, I was thinking about my mother, who was kind of the help in an operating room. She would be considered help. She was a surge tech. She wasn't an anesthesiologist or a surgeon. Or my Aunt Roxy, or my Grandpa Lex, or any of those folks who we often don't think about during times of Black History Month. But the help comes in many colors and many shapes and many sizes and many orientations. And we don't want to ever forget those people as well. So I finish with some bad English because I want to encourage you, like Miss Abeline encouraged May Mobley. You is smart. You is kind. You is important. And that came from the help. That came from encouragement from somebody who we might have looked past or walked over or not thought about. But I want us to think about those as in this last day of Black History Month. Think about those individuals in your life who didn't do it for popularity or didn't do it for a hand clap or even a paycheck necessarily, but did it because they loved you and they loved God and they loved the God in you. God be with you always.